Please go right ahead and enjoy your meal. We're going to go on and proceed on with our program today. It is my esteemed honor to introduce to you today, he's got on here Andrew Redmond, but I know him as Andy Redmond, who is the Executive Vice President for the National Infantry Museum. Let me preface this, I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but you're sitting in here in one of the world's greatest museums, bar none. If you have never, and I've had a couple of folks tell me this, if you have never been to this museum, you are really cheating yourself more than anything else, because it is a wonderful experience. We were talking right before we got started here. It is something you really need to plan a full day for. You come here. In some cases, you may have to have 2 or 3 if you really want to enjoy and see everything that goes on around it. And we are extremely blessed as a community and as a region to have such a facility like this in Columbus. It's just a great place to be. This is a 195,000 square foot facility you'll see, and for the most part, Andy is responsible for the day-to-day operation of the museum, the revenue generation, execution of the annual operating budget, and he also assists with fundraising, which I know has got to be a fun thing for you to do, is have to go out and raise funds. That's, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. With that said, though, please join me in giving Andy a warm welcome this afternoon. Andy?
Thanks, Rick. Let me start with a disclaimer. I've met probably about half the people in the room. Many of you may know that I'm a retired Air Force guy, and you ask what's the Air Force guy doing in an Army museum. Well, I'm from Columbus, born and raised, and I spent 27 years in the Air Force saying, yeah, I'm from the home of the infantry, that's why I'm in the Air Force. But after I moved home, I worked for a defense company for a while. I kind of got tired of that. Had the opportunity to come work for the museum, and I'll tell you, this is a great place to visit. It's a great place to see, and it is a fantastic place to work. So I'm happy to be here today to have a chance to talk to you about this museum. And if I can get things to work, we'll get started. So I'm going to talk a little bit, talk about the museum, who we are, what we do, talk about some things that happened before the museum opened, that happened after the museum opened. I'll go through about the 10 years of our history pretty quickly, and then I'm going to do a deep dive into the last year. One of the things we say here at the museum is this is much more than a museum. And if you're from Columbus, I hope you see advertised the things that we do through a year to make this place a vibrant place for our community. But before I do all that, I'm going to start with saying, you know, I've heard Mayor Henderson and Richard Bishop taunting this tour as the good, the bad, and the ugly tour. And I'm going to say that I'm starting, and I'm going to talk and self-proclaim that we're part of the good part of Columbus. So before we get started on all of that background I was talking about, I'm going to start with a quiz. Anybody know what the best free museum in the United States is? So far you're doing very well. The National Infantry Museum in 2016, USA Today Readers Poll, and you see some of the competition there. I'll tell you, it was a strong group. But this museum was voted the best free museum in the United States, and we still maintain that title. Several years ago, CNN Travel published a list of the 12 best military museums in the world. Anybody want to guess which ones of these were on the list? If you look at the competition there, the Imperial War Museum in London, the Museum of the Great Patriotic War in Moscow, Les Invalides in Paris, the National Infantry Museum, the answer was, you're correct, all of the above. And I'll tell you some of the other ones that were on that list. National Air and Space Museum, the U.S. Air Force Museum, and again, I'm an Air Force guy, and I've been to that museum, and it's a fantastic location. But I would put this museum up against anyone in the country and certainly around the world. TripAdvisor maintains ratings. People come to visit attractions around the state of Georgia, go on, and after their visit, we'll do a ranking. Anybody want to guess what the highest ranking attraction in Georgia is? Look at, I mean, the aquarium, the historic district in Savannah, which is fantastic, the World of Coca-Cola Museum, But once again, the National Infantry Museum in Columbus, Georgia. A couple other things we're proud of, and then I'll get off my soapbox here in a second. The Georgia Arts and Humanities Award was presented to us a couple of years ago for arts in Georgia. The center one there, the Thea Award for outstanding attractions in the attractions industry, that's a relatively recent award. It's about 20 years old. It's given every year. 150, 200 people apply, and about 10 locations around the world are selected every year. We were selected in 2011 for a Thea Award for Outstanding Achievement. Some of the other museums and attractions that year, the Walt Disney Family Museum out in San Francisco. There was a Hong Kong museum that was on the list, one in Shanghai that was an exhibition. So we're pretty proud of that. And then I've already talked about TripAdvisor. We maintain somewhere between 4.95 and 4.97 out of 5 over the course of a year. So this is kind of what this building is here for. And I'll talk about the organizations in the building in a minute, but really the National Infantry Museum, the number one reason for our being and the reason this building was built was to honor soldiers, past, present, future, and I'll talk about some of the ways that we do that. One of the things that we see from families particularly is that they want to make sure that their soldiers' sacrifices are not forgotten. And we do that with this building and with the memorials around on the outside. And then we have an education mission that goes from kindergarten through corporate leadership training programs, the Army education program out on post, to educate people about what the infantry is. And I'll tell you, if you think about the history of the United States infantry, and all of the significant events since its founding, and look at all of the campaigns that the infantry has participated in, you're really talking about the history of the United States. Because at every significant juncture, anything of historical importance that's happened in the United States, the military and the infantry in particular have been there. So we believe that it's important to teach people about that history from the infantry and a broader picture of U.S. history. So I know some of you have probably never been here before, and I'm not going to take a poll. I'm finished with the quiz part. But if you haven't been here, we're much more than what you see when you come up the front sidewalk and come in. Way up in the back, we've got a section we call the Memorial Walk of Honor, where there's about 45 unit memorials. Those are associations of veterans of particular units, whether it's a brigade, division, certain campaigns. The biggest one up there is the 173rd Airborne Brigade Memorial, but there's about 45 of them up there that honor the unit that those associations support. And I'll tell you, from a tourism perspective, one of the things that does is that brings those veterans associations here to have reunions where they can then go up and look at their unit memorial. You've got Inouye Field, that was named in 2014 for Senator Daniel Inouye, who was a senator from Hawaii, who was an early and strong supporter of this museum, who was also a World War II Medal of Honor recipient for action in Italy. Back in the back, we have a series of World War II vintage buildings that were moved here, and I'll show you a picture of that here in a little bit. Intact off of Fort Benning before they were demolished. We've restored those buildings. We maintain them as an educational venue. There's a chow hall out there where Boy Scout groups go eat. We do summer camps out there. The Patton's headquarters building, a lot of people forget that not only is Fort Benning the home of the infantry, but it's home of armor and armor tactics developments in the 30s. And General Patton was here developing those tactics. And one of the buildings out there, that one in particular, was his headquarters building when he was stationed at Fort Benning. I'll show you pictures of this here in a little bit. The Global War on Terrorism Memorial, we believe, is the finest memorial in the United States to today's generation in the fight that we're engaged in since 9/11, that we'll probably be engaged in for a generation or more. And That memorial, and I'll talk about that at the very end of the briefing, very important to families. But again, it's by far the finest memorial to today's fight in the United States. And across the sidewalk from that is a 3/4 scale replica of the Vietnam Wall. So one of the things that's unique about our building and what happens here, almost every Friday and some Thursdays, there are graduations out on our parade field, and there'll be 1,000 to 3,000 family members walk down that sidewalk out to the stadium and then come back. And we talk to them as part of the graduation script that they're walking between their grandparents' war, the Vietnam War on one side, their parents' war on the other side, and the Global War on Terrorism Memorial, and the generation, the soldiers that are graduating or joining that war. And I'll tell you, at this point in that war, 95% or more of the military that fight that war are volunteers. And so we think it's pretty significant that they walk that walk between those two memorials. As Rick said, we're 195,000 square feet. We're also, a lot of people don't realize how big our campus is. We're about 155 acres. It goes from the fence line at Fort Benning up past the Hampton Hotel, another half a mile up, which we use currently for educational camping. There's a primitive campground out there that scout troops use that we will develop over time. But anyway, so that's kind of the campus for those of that have never been here. So I told you I'd talk about who we are. There's really 3 organizations in this building. I am in the National Infantry Museum Foundation. We're the property owners. We own the building and the grounds. We operate it on behalf of the U.S. Army. We're basically the landlord. So you see some of the things we do. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit. We maintain the building. We do all the audio-visual systems in the building on behalf of the Army. So all of the displays that you see lighting up and sounds and all that stuff we maintain. We also have a requirement to generate revenue. So things like this, catering, we run the theater, we run the soldier store, all of those things trying to generate money to help pay for the building. And then we, the foundation, do the civilian education programs that I talked about that we're trying to educate the public what the infantry is. So kindergarten through 12th grade, we have approved curriculum for both Georgia and Alabama. School groups come in, and depending on what they're looking for, we can do tailored education programs for civics, for government, for history, all kinds of different things that we can do, and we do all year long for school groups, Atlanta, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Columbus, certainly. The Army has a museum division here that are the museum professionals that are government civilian employees that control all of the collection of artifacts that make up the National Infantry Museum collection. That's both in climate control storage in the basement, as well as inside the galleries where they maintain the storyline and they take care of all those artifacts. And they also do the military training programs. And I don't know if you guys noticed when you came in, there was a soldier tour here today, a basic training company that was in the building as part of their educational requirement to learn about the history of the Army and the infantry. They come here 2 or 3 groups a week and spend several hours here, and the Army kind of manages that educational program. You're in a building that cost about $110 million to build. You can see there that we've raised about $103 million to date to pay for that. I won't make you do the math. That's about $7 million that we still carry in construction debt that we're trying to get out from under. But a lot of people don't understand that the relationship, this is probably one of the finest public-private partnerships in Columbus, and certainly the best one in the Army Museum system, where the foundation owns and operates and the Army contributes. And so we run about a $6 million a year budget. Roughly $2 million of that is paid by the Army, and we don't charge them rent, we don't charge them a lease. They pay a prorated share of the operating cost of the building. So utilities and housekeeping and groundskeeping and janitorial service and all of those things, plus a prorated share of the maintenance and IT maintenance that we do. We generate about a third of our budget, about $2 million, and I talked about all those things, the theater and catering and the restaurant, and we've got virtual reality simulators downstairs that are very successful. So all of those things combined, bringing about a third of our budget. And then the rest of it, as Rick said, we have to go out and find, and we do that. You should have seen donation boxes when you come in the door. We have corporate and individual membership programs. We have individual donors that give us money, and then we just go scrounge wherever we can find. The other thing that we raise money for, in addition to that $6 million a year, is this is an attraction, and we need to keep it fresh. We need to bring people here back to see things, and so we constantly are trying to update pieces of the building or add new things. The Global War on Terrorism Memorial is one that we added, dedicated in 2017. That was about a $2.5 million project. We're currently working a $2.5 million grant from the state of Georgia from the economic development folks to renovate one of the galleries inside the building. It's called the Current Operations Gallery, but it dates to 2007. And so we've got a grant from the state of Georgia to allow us to completely gut and redo that gallery. You think about things that have happened in the infantry history since 2007. IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, their rise and use as a strategic weapon, women in combat, the use of robotics, all kinds of sensory things that are happening. And so we're going to update that gallery to kind of capture all of that. Now the foundation, have the grant, we're executing it, but the Army staff is the one that writes the story and chooses the artifacts that go in and how they're displayed. So collaboratively, we're doing that project. And then I talked about the Vietnam Wall. When it was built as a traveling exhibit, so it was built very lightweight. Part of that lightweight was the panels that have the 58,000 names engraved on them are an acrylic product that came and sat outside in the Georgia sun since 2014 and started oxidizing really badly. So we've covered them up with a film product just to make it look pretty, but we're fundraising to replace those acrylic panels with granite veneer that will stand up to the sun here. So that fundraising project's ongoing. Take you back a little bit in time. The Infantry Museum has been at Fort Benning since 1957. Started in one of the welcome centers, went to some old classrooms. In the 1960s, Mr. James Woodruff started a fundraising effort trying to build a new museum. The Vietnam War kind of got in the way of that. The military was not a real popular thing in the late 1960s, early 1970s. So they finally kind of gave up. They took the money they had raised, and instead of building a new building, renovated what had been the old hospital out on Fort Benning, and that's where the Infantry Museum resided until we opened in 2009. The National Infantry Museum Foundation spun off from the National Infantry Association in the late 1990s, started trying to raise money to build this building. In the early 2000s, kind of really took off. Two local folks, Mr. William Turner and Mr. Frank Lumpkin, early on gave the foundation kind of seed money to get started and get serious, and then that money allowed the foundation to get serious and go hire some folks to start to design and then really get serious about fundraising. So over the next 4 years, the original target was about $70 million. As the museum was really being designed, it turned into a $110 million project. And the funding really came, the Columbus community, it probably gave about a third of the overall money to build this building that you're in. And when you really look at that, and I'm not going to go into the names, but if I did, you would recognize them all because they also do all the things downtown. This community is extremely supportive of things that make the community better. And a lot of those families and foundations and organizations and companies that you would see me list are the same ones anybody in here that does anything charitable would recognize. The federal government, and I talked about Senator Inouye, early on was a supporter of the museum. One of the reasons we have construction debt is because in 2011, when the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives, Earmarks became kind of a dirty word. We had earmarks in the 2011 budget that would have paid the remainder of the construction cost. That budget was never signed, so we didn't get that last lots of millions of dollars. So that's why we're still trying to struggle to get out from under that. State of Georgia has been very supportive over time. And then we go find people who are interested in the infantry and the Army and soldiers and go ask for money. So construction started about 2007, finished 2009. But before the building opened, we did a couple of things. One was the move of the World War II Company Street buildings off of Fort Benning. And you can see some of the pictures there. That was done before the museum ever opened. Because those buildings were slated for demolition, and Mr. Lumpkin, again, was adamant that we get those buildings off the post and get them over here. And so that happened before the building opened. The other thing that happened was the dedication of the parade field. If you go up the last 100 yards ramp downstairs, kind of the signature attraction of this museum, you walk through dioramas of 8 battles starting in the Revolutionary War up through Iraq. And it's Lexington and Antietam and Soissons and Normandy and Corregidor, Korea, Vietnam, and Iraq. The foundation, before the museum opened, went and got soil from those 8 battles, imported it, and then did a ceremony on the parade field to spread that soil out where soldiers now walk on graduation day. And so as part of the graduation script, again, we talk about the sacred soil that those soldiers are walking across, generations of sacrifice that have gotten us to where we are today. So some of the pictures up there, people that participated in that ceremony had some tie to the somebody who participated in the battle. So Revolutionary War soil, that was Alexander Hamilton's great grandson somewhere in there. The battle on the ramp that is in Vietnam is the Ia Drang Valley. That was, we were soldiers once and young, battle with General Hal Moore and Sergeant Major Plumley. That's them spreading the soil out there on the parade field. So it was a pretty significant emotional event. And then we opened June 19th, 2009. General Colin Powell was the speaker. Obviously, that was a 12-year effort to get to that day. So now I'm going to talk, since then, there have been a lot of more significant events in the history of the museum. I'm going to run through those real quick. Starting with the beam from the World Trade Center, the rubbish of the World Trade Center. The New York City Fire Department brought to Columbus in 2009 and donated to the museum a beam. They did it in honor of a guy that was killed in the World Trade Center who was also happened to be an Army colonel retired, Rick Rescorla, who was chief of security for Morgan Stanley in the World Trade Center. He was not very popular with his company because he forced them to practice evacuation plans, because after the first attempt at, or the first bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, he saw that that was going to continue to be a target. So he forced his company to practice evacuating, and on 9/11 got all of their employees out. And the last time anybody saw him, he was going back up the stairs to help other companies when the tower collapsed. One of the things that we did 2010 was a Vietnam veteran welcome home ceremony. And I've heard people, and some in this room have told me that that was probably the most significant event that we've done to honor their families, because Vietnam era parents were not really welcomed home well after Vietnam, and so that ceremony was an attempt to right that wrong. 2011, we dedicated a memorial out on Heritage Walk to the Desert Shield and Storm. Infantry coin, I don't know if you guys know that story. The U.S. Mint, the Congress has the ability to create a couple of designs a year and then tell the U.S. Mint to produce a coin. 2012, one of those coins was an Infantry Museum coin. That campaign raised a little over $1 million by the time they sold the coins that were donated by the Mint. Vietnam Wall came in 2014. Again, it was a traveling wall. It was kind of permanently installed here, and then I'll tell you that in 2017, the company that owned it, Dignity Memorial, which is a nationwide funeral home company, Stripler Hamby here is their local affiliate. That company donated that wall to us, so it's ours forever, and that's one of the reasons we're trying to fix it. Best Free Museum was 2016. Some of you may recognize the guy in uniform there on the back, who at the time was a Commandant of Infantry, now is our president. That's Pete Jones. I talked about the GWOT Memorial Dedication Ceremony, the original one in 2017, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. A lot of folks in the room here instrumental in 2018. We did an event here tonight at the museum. The Chamber helped us do that. They raised a significant amount of money to put that event on for the community. And we had about 40 Officer Candidate School candidates who came over as part of their history research to get through Officer Candidate School, participated in that. We told them where they were going to be standing in the museum, and then they did the research to be able to stand in front of that and tell people about it. So now I'm going to do a real quick, I talked about the museum, that we see it as much more than a static set of display cases with things in them. And I'm just going to go back for a year and kind of tell you all the different things we do here and hope that you come participate in them, because most of these things are recurring events. There's kind of our attendance numbers and all the students, and you see there, last year we had 266,000 people. Lots of school groups, lots of Boy Scouts, soldiers coming, graduations, families, all kinds of things going on. Almost a year ago exactly, we hosted an event that was put on by Fort Benning and the Chamber called Bottoberfest. It was a robotics day at the museum. In this room, there were school kids building robots that then did the little BattleBot things. Fort Benning had some contractors across at Oxbow Meadows doing capability demonstrations to Fort Benning leadership. And then on a parade field was a drone race, which was pretty interesting. They set up a race course. You can kind of see there in the middle, and race these little drones around at 80 miles an hour through all those obstacles. Last year was the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. The liaison officers on Fort Benning came to us to ask us to do an event here, so we put on a 100th anniversary celebration. You can see the flags on the parade field of all the European nations that participated in World War I. Those are the guys that are on Fort Benning that embed with the U.S. Army for a 3-year tour to kind of represent their country. So on a Sunday morning, we did a ceremony out on the parade field to honor the end of the war. January of every year, we do a symposium. Last year, it was on cyber. Some of the panel members included Pete Jones' sister, who stood up the Army Cyber Capability Center. She was here. She had the TSIS Chief Information Officer, some folks from Columbus State, and that was a half-day symposium that's free and open to the public. One of the things we didn't have until last year was a temporary gallery space. We opened, the first one we did was some artwork out of the Infantry Museum collection down in the basement. Most of you probably recognize this young man, Colonel Ralph Puckett. That one of the portraits in that gallery was him. And then over on the far side is Frank Lumpkin III and Frank Lumpkin IV, looking at a picture of Frank Lumpkin Jr., the dad and granddad that was a World War II veteran. April, we did a reading of a play that was produced and done at the Springer, but we had kind of an advance set up. This is Army spouses that talk about the stress that Army families undergo when their soldiers deployed. April of last year, or April of this year, we reopened the Family Gallery. It had been closed for several years. Our volunteers and families kept begging us to get it back open, so we put it back together and opened it in April of this year. And it's one of our more popular galleries because kids can go in and dress up in Army uniform and get their picture made. And that's always popular. In May, we had a Vietnam-era Medal of Honor recipient here, did a book signing, a lecture, and spoke at a graduation ceremony. He was kicked out of Officer Candidate School, went to Germany, and was kind of a flub-up kind of guy when he volunteered to go to Vietnam. And in Vietnam, was in a battle where he basically saved his company and was awarded the Medal of Honor. Memorial Day and Veterans Day of every year, we do a ceremony dedicating pavers that we sell out on Heritage Walk. But we also do some other things. We'll do a flag retirement ceremony, which if those of you don't know, the proper way to dispose of a U.S. flag is to burn it. And so we have a pit out back where we do that. And then we honor families who came to look at their loved ones' pavers. 75th anniversary of D-Day, we had multiple events through the day, a ceremony out on the parade field. We had three World War II veterans here during the day. One of them was at Normandy the day after D-Day. We also changed the temporary gallery and opened it up as a 75th anniversary of D-Day, and that's still open if you're interested. It's at the end of the 100 yards ramp. June 19th, we turned 10, and we did a donor reception the night before, and then a cake cutting and a ribbon cutting and some things during the day. The staff at that point, you see all those events that came up, we were kind of getting tired, so we toned this one down a little bit. But then just about 2 weeks after that, welcomed our 3 millionth visitor since the museum opened. Family was here. The parents and the grandparents of a soldier who was going to graduate the next day out on the parade field had come to visit the museum, and they walked in, and the grandfather was our 3 millionth visitor. We do every year on the 4th of July. We are Columbus's only daytime 4th of July event. And if you've never been, you should, and particularly if you have kids or grandkids. Bouncy houses and parades and parachute team jumping in, all kinds of things during the day. And we'll have typically 6,000 or 7,000 people here for that. We set up a food court out in the parking lot with 10 vendors, and it's a lot of fun. It's free except for the stuff you buy at the food court. Did in this room in August, the Korean consulate from Atlanta and the Georgia Department of Veterans Affairs presented Korea appreciation medals to about 30 Korean era veterans, most of them not very mobile at this point. Once a year we do a gala kind of honoring our membership society, the 1775 Society. That's always in August. We'll have about 400 people here for that. Last couple of events I'll talk about. I talked about the GWOT Memorial, that today's generation of warriors. Unfortunately, that fight's still going on, and so we know that every year we're going to have to engrave more names on that memorial. And so the Saturday after Labor Day every year, we're going to have a ceremony. And the first year we added 26 names. Last year we added 46 names. The evening before, we do a dinner honoring Gold Star family members, which if you don't know is a family member who's lost a loved one in service. The three speakers that evening, a wife who was actually an active duty Army officer. She was in Afghanistan when her Army officer husband was killed in Iraq. She came home to bury him at Arlington, went back and finished her deployment. And now, that was about 10 years ago, she's since remarried another Army officer. We had a Ranger mom who lost her son in 2017. And then this guy is a retired Command Sergeant Major who was the Sergeant Major of the 173rd Airborne Brigade. Deployed to Afghanistan, his son was in the brigade with him. And before they completed their mission transfer, the son was out on the left seat ride with the outgoing unit. The dad was in the command post, listened to the firefight that killed his son. Came home and buried him, and then went back and finished his year-long deployment. So then on the Saturday, we do a ceremony to honor those new names as well as the almost 7,000 that are already on the memorial. And I'll tell you, if you don't come to anything during the year but one thing, this is it. Saturday after Labor Day, we'll do it about 9 o'clock in the morning so it's not too hot. But that is a fantastic way to honor those families. We had 2017, we had about 125 family members here. This year we had 250, and we think that's going to continue to grow because they see this as a ceremony that honors their loved ones. So we think that this is more than a museum. We think this is a place for people in Columbus to be proud of. It's something you should bring your friends to. And then I got one more thing to do because I'd lose my nonprofit fundraising union card if I didn't ask you for help. There are a lot of ways that people in this community help our museum. Companies in Columbus are premier partners. We have levels from $5,000 to $100,000 a year that come with some level of benefits. And we can tailor those packages to you if you're interested. Or you could just, if you're a small company and you want to just sponsor one thing, we do kids' movies in the summer and in the wintertime that are free to kids. We always look for people to help do that. I talked about the paver ceremony. We sell pavers and trees and benches and all kinds of things, trying to help raise money for the museum. The Honor Circle is a program that we use to support the maintenance and engraving of the Global War on Terrorism Memorial. We'll take anything. If you want to donate to support that memorial, we'll do that. I talked about the membership programs we have. We've got from $15 a month that we intend for young soldiers to participate in, up to the 1775 Society that's from $1,000 to $10,000 a year, individual memberships. Days like today help us because the catering bill that the City of Columbus is paying, I hope, we get part of that. We have an exclusive caterer that generates revenue for us. And if nothing else, bring your friends out, show them this building, show them what it's about, and drop a little $5 in the donation box. All right, the guy in the back's flashing time signs at me, so I think I'm done unless there are questions.
I know you got questions. What questions do you have for Andy?
Ms. Thomas.
As we came in on Fort Benning Road, they were talking about the area to the right of the bus as we were coming in, and the what may be going in there. Would you speak to that for just
I will. There are, when the South Lumpkin Road gate into Fort Benning closed, the foundation and the Army agreed that at some point we would put a road across the northern part of our property, which I told you is another quarter mile past the Hampton, that will connect South Lumpkin Road to Benning Road to allow traffic from South Columbus and Phoenix City to get to the Benning Road gate into Fort Benning. That road's currently under design and development. Rick Jones is here from the city. It's city, state, and federal funding. It's in progress. It's probably going to be 2022 or so that road will turn off the traffic circle on South Lumpkin Road in front of the waterworks, go across the northern boundary of our property, connect to Benning Road. It will also include an extension of the Follow Me Trail, the bike trail, the bridge that comes over Victory Drive. The bike trail will come down the old railroad bed and turn and go across that same northern part of our property to connect with a bike trail that goes down to the Riverwalk through the Waterworks property. One of the things we're trying to do as a foundation is use that northern piece of property. It's about 58 acres. We would like to, over time, develop that to generate some revenue for the foundation so that we can become more financially sound and self-sufficient. At one point before, it's probably 2009 or 10, there was a development plan done and approved by the city that included some retail and restaurant and mixed-use housing. We're in the process of kind of redesigning that, rethinking, but we're hoping over the next 2 or 3 years to put in a north-south road that would kind of bisect our property and allow us to develop some of that. We think there's a great market in South Columbus for some more restaurant folks that maybe don't want to be out on Victory Drive, for office space, for contractors that are working on Fort Benning. There's a market here that will help us, but will also help the city by putting that property back on the tax rolls, because as a nonprofit educational mission, we don't currently pay property tax on. If it's developed, we would. And the other thing it does is help South Columbus. I mean, you guys came in on a bus, you know that South Columbus could use some improvement. So we're hoping all of those kind of goals roll into one and selfishly help us with our financial standing. What else? All right, thanks very much. Thanks for coming.
Andy, thank you for the work you're doing here. Thank you for also putting up with me with the frustration about having to build a road that's not much longer than this room, but that's another story in itself also. But thank you, and we really do appreciate your hospitality and letting us be here today as well. moving right along here. We're going to invite now Tara Martinez to come forward. She is the Chief of Operations for Westville. And I have to admit, by talking about the Infantry Museum, I have not yet been to Westville. I went to Westville when it was in Lumpkin many, many moons ago. But it is another destination in this community that I think each and every one of us should take advantage of, particularly in terms of inviting our friends and family to come visit it and go see this. Tara, I got to admit right now off the bat, I'm a little disappointed. You're not dressed in any period costume today. And so I just feel like we're not getting the whole effect here. But anyway, please join me in inviting Tara Martinez to the mic. Tara?
A little bit short here. So I don't have quite the presentation that the NIM has. I'm not one to read a bunch of slides and numbers, and I kind of just talk. So I did include some pictures. And if you could just put it on a rotation, that's probably the easiest, just so it can kind of just be up there. How many of you are from Columbus? Majority of you? Not as many as I thought. Okay, who's familiar with historic Westville? Everybody that's from Columbus. Then you probably went in 4th grade when you were a child, and like most, you probably haven't been back, correct? That's right, yeah. So that was kind of what we discovered when we started moving to Columbus, is that the majority of people that lived and grew up in Columbus went when they were children. 4th, 5th grade seemed to be the kind of the age group that went in field trips, and that's kind of the age group that we're seeing now that's coming for field trips. We have expanded our educational programming to allow everything from kindergarten to 12th grade, so that we can touch on economics, sociological stuff. We can touch on environmental stuff. We can touch on Native Americans. And in the future, as we grow, we're hoping to expand to include the Black history as well, the enslaved history. And kind of, so when we talk about the good, bad, and the ugly, that's going to be the history that we want to tell at Historic Westville. So we right now have Native American interpretation, and it's pre-1830s, because obviously in the 1830s, we removed them from the area and we sent them west. So our history right now is pre-1830s, but it will eventually expand on that as well. We began our move process in 2015, officially. 2013 is when the city of Columbus donated the land where our village sits right now. When they offered that land to us, we said, okay, that makes sense for us to move then. That's kind of how Westville ended up in Lumpkin as well. It was started in the 1920s by somebody named Colonel West, and he started collecting buildings that were going to be torn down. And he said, no, we got to save these buildings. What happens to these historic structures if we don't save them? They get torn down and a new building pops up. So that was kind of how it began. And in the 1960s, somebody in Stewart County, the Singer family, donated the land to us there, and the founders started what was then called Westville Handicrafts at the time, Westville after Colonel John West, who just started it in the 1920s, and it kind of just grew. We started collecting more buildings. People said, hey, we have a building, it's gonna get torn down, do you want it? This is the Chattahoochee County Courthouse. It is one of the last remaining fully wooden courthouses in the state of Georgia. It was in Casita, and we saved that in the 70s. That came to us. It was going to be decommissioned. They were going to tear it down, build a new courthouse, and we said, no, we'll take it. What's funny is one of our board members, Walter Miller, actually grew up in the town of Casita, and he remembers playing under the courthouse and being yelled at by the judge when they were in session. So he said, if we don't move and something's going to happen to Westville and we're going to go under or whatever, I want this courthouse. I'm going to move it to my property if I have to. So that didn't happen. Thankfully, the city of Columbus offered the land to us, and we used that as an opportunity to move. Now, the board had started doing feasibility studies back in 2008, 2009 to determine if a move was necessary for historic Westville. What we started seeing in the early 2000s was a drop in visitation. The bypass, if anybody's been down that way now, there's a bypass that you don't have to go through the city of Lumpkin anymore. So businesses started pulling out of Lumpkin. If you've been down there, there's not much there anymore. A lot of the storefronts are closed. There's just not a lot going down there anymore. All the industry that was in that area pulled out. And so we kind of started seeing a drop in visitation. At that time, But then bring around 2008 and the recession we had then, and schools in the area also stopped doing field trips. Muskogee County especially, one of the largest districts in this area, they stopped doing school field trips. So when the school stopped coming, the bypass happened. We just had a lot of things that caused our drop in visitation. And we said, it's not really feasible for us to stay here. And we want to be able to preserve not just the buildings, but the history of this area. Because that's one thing that we really want people to learn, and especially children. A lot of people don't know. You learn history in school, and you learn about different states, and you might learn about your region, but you don't really learn about the area where you grew up. I remember about a year ago, somebody told me about a movie, and I went home and I watched the movie, and I'm watching this movie and I go, this movie's filmed where I grew up. Small little town in North Carolina. All this history that I never knew from just the little tiny town where I grew up. And I said, that's kind of what our story is here. We want people to know about how life was in Southwest Georgia back in the 19th century. What kind of industry would have been here? What tools would people have used? And so we are one of the only museums of this kind in this area. I think we're about 150 miles from the closest one that's anything similar. And we have interpretation going on 5 days a week. So we have active interpretation. So you don't just have, on Saturdays you can come and see everybody kind of doing that trade. So we have our blacksmith, we have a woodworker, we have a leather worker, we have a full-time Native American interpreter right now. We have a quilter. And like Mr. Fred, he's our oldest employee, our longest. He's been here 49 years. He's been working for us. He started at Westville when he was 17 years old, and he is still working for us today. Sweetest, kindest man you'll ever know. So if you ever went to Westville when you were a child, you probably met Fred. Our future, I think, we've just opened. June 22nd was when we officially opened. We have already welcomed probably close to 5,000 visitors so far in the less than 3 months we've been open. We are starting to book field trips every weekday that we're open, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We're almost completely booked for all of October, November, and December so far. What I'm finding surprising is that there's still a lot of people in Columbus that don't know that we're here, that we're moved, and that we're open. So we're working really hard to kind of get that exposure and get our name out there and get the word out there. But we need the help of, everybody in Columbus, especially you guys in leadership positions, to let your people know, let people that, you work with know, and your friends and colleagues, because we are also a nonprofit, just like the National Infantry Museum. The only difference is we don't have a public-private partnership. We are completely private funded. So we really rely on foundations and corporations and local citizens of Columbus and the area and businesses and philanthropists to fully support us, because like I said, we're just in phase 1, so we've only moved a portion of our buildings down here. Phase 1, we originally budgeted $7 million to move. A big portion of that cost was the infrastructure, because of course you have to grade the site, you have to put in plumbing and electrical and all that. During that process, we had some other issues come about, but that ended up costing us actually over $8 million. And so what we've discovered is phase 2 is going to cost us a lot more than we originally anticipated as well. So right now we're just focusing on trying to get open and working on our programming, but phase 2 is where that's kind of the biggest vision for me for the future, because that really expands our interpretation, our programming. And like I said, we really want to talk about everybody that was from this region in the 19th century and what really would have been going on and what would have been happening. And that's, like I said, the good, bad, and the ugly. So it's talking about the history of the enslaved Africans. It's talking about the Native Americans. It's talking about the European history as well. But there are not very many places that touch on all of those in one location. And so I really see Historic Westville as a place to kind of bridge that gap and bring everybody together and be able to educate people on who lived here, what happened during that time, and to be a safe place. Because if you look at issues in society today, one of the things that are really talked about is social inclusion and having more safe places where people can come to discuss the things that occurred during the 19th century, because it wasn't pretty, but it has to be told. People have to be educated and they have to know about it. And obviously there's a fine line between educating and being passionate and making sure we don't anger people as well, but we want to evoke emotion, you know, like the new sculptures in Montgomery. You want to be able to talk about it and people go, oh, okay, you know, evoke that emotion and go, wow, I had no idea. And so that's our goal with our vision for the future as we expand. We're working on building committees, and we've reached out to some local historians and stuff, and we're trying to make sure we have the right people to help us interpret that aspect. But for the time being, we currently, like I said, we have active interpretation going on all the time. We are working to try to get events finally on the calendar. Our first big event is coming up November 2nd. That'll be our fall festival. And we'll have active interpretation, we'll have demonstration, kids games. We're hoping to eventually have open hearth cooking again. The city of Columbus won't allow us to serve the food from the open hearth, but we will hope to at least be able to demonstrate that again in the future. And the buildings that you see have they were all moved from Lumpkin except for one. And they were all reconstructed. Anything that had a second floor the second floor had to be completely reconstructed on site. We had bridges and overpasses that we had to contend with on the move from Lumpkin. And a lot of this was preservation of the buildings. A lot of what we discovered when we were starting to move the buildings is that because these buildings, a majority of the structure sat on the ground in Lumpkin because they didn't require footings and all of that back then, is that they had a lot of termite damage and stuff from just sitting coming into contact with the ground. So a lot of them had to be completely redone. You know, we tried to salvage and save as much of the original structure or wood as possible. The majority of it was, but we had to change some of the larger beams and stuff like that. So these are just a few pictures of our interpretation going on, the buildings as they sit on the site. I wish I had, I'm trying to get a better aerial photo. I don't have anything like that right now of our completed site, so you guys can have an idea. We have also we're working on that, on a lease to sublet. We also rent another 200 and something acres from the city past our site down to Wren Pond, if anybody's familiar with Wren Pond and the spur off the Riverwalk, because you can take the Riverwalk all the way to historic Westville. So hop on a bike, ride on bikes downtown, and come visit us. But we are in the process of getting ready to sublet that land and hopefully break ground next year on an RV park that will also be put in down there with some primitive camping in the future as well. So we're hoping with Oxbow now and the National Infantry Museum and Historic Westville and then the future RV park and camping that we're kind of a destination. South Lumpkin Road has become a destination. You can spend an entire weekend there. We'd eventually maybe like to rebrand that area too as a cultural district of some kind. I've talked to Skip, we're working on that. But really we're a destination. We want people to be able to come and stay the weekend and spend another day in Columbus, because we all know what one more day does for the city of Columbus and for revenue. So that's our goal, and we've been welcomed with open arms. Everybody's given us really good feedback, and so we're excited. We have a long ways to go. Raising money is a huge part of that. It's an uphill battle. Unlike the NEM, we don't have a public-private partnership. It may be something we look at in the future. But right now we're 100% privately funded, and the standard for museums, the NIMS is a little bit high, but the standard for museums for revenue is that the revenue you bring in as a museum for admission and gift shop sales, because most don't have theaters and concessions and all that, is 10 to 20% of your operating budget. Our operating budget right now is around $1 to $1.1 million a year. We're lucky if we bring in $100,000 to $200,000 a year in admission and gift shop sales and revenue. The other has to be entirely fundraising. So we really need the support of people in the area to donate. We offer memberships right now. We have several membership packages. We are in the process. I'm trying to work on some corporate sponsorship or individual sponsorship packages and looking at what we can offer in that way too. And then we have to work, we apply for grants and such as well. So we're trying to figure out what we can offer to people in the meantime until we kind of expand and grow. But that's about it. Anybody have any questions? Super informal, I'm sorry.
Do you have any event facilities that you can do corporate events there? Or
So we are actually getting ready to host an event probably mid-November. We are going to invite wedding planners, florists, anybody in the area that would be involved with events, and kind of have a meet and greet and allow them to come look at our site and just kind of say, hey, here's what we have. What can we do to make this usable for events? We have 2 churches in our village. They're not large, probably hold 70 to 100 people. We do have quite a bit of land space where you could throw a tent out. We don't have the courthouse. Several of our buildings, like the upstairs of the courthouse, we can't use because we'd have to have an elevator. That would be what they consider an assembly space because of the square footage. So we have a lot of space that can't really be used yet. We hope in the future to have an elevator and be able to get to use the second floor of the courthouse, but that's not feasible right now. So we do have some event
Follow
space.
up also, you said that you've only moved a portion of it?
Yeah, so we still
How
have,
much is left?
we have 14 structures left in Lumpkin. Yeah, that we're working with, that we're trying to maintain there also as best as possible until we can move those. The faster we can move those, the better, because the longer they sit there, the more at risk they are for deterioration as well. You know, we've had termite treatments and stuff done on them. We're in the process of trying to get them wrapped. But there's a lot of maintenance that has to be done on the site in Lumpkin as well, while we're also trying to maintain and run the site here. So we do have 14 more structures to move. Yeah. So the hope is we will be able to hold events, weddings, and parties and that stuff in the future as well. We just know that's not this year. I'm sorry?
How many structures are current?
We currently have 17 structures on site right now. 16 came from Lumpkin. Yes. 16 came from Lumpkin and 1 was donated from the West Point area.
Other questions?
Nothing? Was I just that good? Yes. Thank you.
It's my pleasure now to introduce to you Pace Halter. Pace is the President and Chief Operating Officer for the W.C. Bradley Company in the real estate. One of the reasons we've asked Pace to be here, of course, is all the excitement and activity that's now going on along the Riverwalk itself and in the uptown area. It's largely attributed, and has been for some time now, to the Bradley Company itself. And in just understanding a little bit what I know about it, we thought it was important that we bring him in and let him share with you what their idea and plan and future is for that entire area. So if you will, please join me in welcoming Pace Halter. Pace?
Good afternoon, everyone. Everybody doing okay? Yeah. Good. I have the dreaded after lunch and before the afternoon break slot. So what I've done, I've put together about 50 slides, mostly charts and graphs. We'll go through those and then take any questions that you may have after that. No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and tell you a little bit about what we're doing, most of it around the uptown area, but not all of it. I will touch on our studio, our film and television studio, Flat Rock, a little bit at the end. But yeah, I love starting presentations with this, particularly when you're talking about, in this scenario, kind of the good, the bad, the ugly, the history of Columbus. This is one of my favorite pictures. In fact, we have a similar version of this, very large, hanging inside of our office, as really a reminder of kind of where we've come from, and more importantly, hopefully, where we're going. If you look back at our city, obviously most of you understand the kind of industrial past that we have here relative to the river and textiles, et cetera. The beauty of this is we've come from what used to look like this with permanent dam structures in the river, heavy industrial downtown area, and a lot of kind of congestion and boring, if you will, buildings, to something that looks much more like this today, which is great. It's a continuation of that ongoing growth that we proudly take part of as the city continues to grow. Again, if you look from the Phoenix City side, again, same part of that same image here, looking back across the river at what today it looks like in the uptown area. The Bradley Company, obviously, most of you are familiar with the company. I hope you are. This is our headquarters building here, a building that we've been in since 1885 when the company was founded. It was originally a cotton warehouse for the company. through part of Mr. Bradley's textile and farming operations in South Columbus. As I said, we still own and operate out of this building today. It's also home to the Bradley Museum. I put this up for one particular reason. Obviously, we're here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. A lot of what we own are in the uptown area that we have not started working on yet very clearly falls into, in some cases, the bad, and in a lot of cases, certainly the ugly. We hope to change that, and we will over time. But I think it's important to note part of that, an important part of our history, is not tearing these buildings down, but keeping them. And whether it's the same use or an alternative use, really putting money into trying to revitalize those. And you'll see some more examples as I go through this presentation of how that is important to us and a little bit about how we have done that and hope to continue to do that. As I said, this was originally a cotton warehouse. Today it's an 80,000 square foot office building, home to not only Bradley Company, but a number of other tenants as well. So again, adaptive reuse is an important part of what we do. Part of that just comes with the history and the ownership of the real estate that we have around Columbus. Riverfront Place, which was alluded to earlier, is our 7.5 acre site that is essentially everything between 13th and 14th and Broadway and the river, with the exception of Countries and their parking lot adjacent to that. We started this process now almost 5 years ago. At the time, I was a consultant living in Atlanta and working out of Atlanta, and was hired by Matt Swift and the Bradley Company to come down and help them try to figure out how to plan this 7.5 acre gold mine that was sitting on the riverfront. We spent almost a year in planning and ultimately wound up with this plan here. We have begun the execution of this plan. Most of you are aware or have seen. Some of you may have even been in the Rapids. This building is open and operational there in the top left-hand corner. That's 226 residential rental units and about 16,500 square feet of retail. The first retail tenant of which was announced several months ago is a second location for Travioli's Italian Kitchen. They're under construction now and hopefully will be open first part of the year. We're really excited about them. The Rapids itself, we opened March 1. As of yesterday, we are 62% occupied. We're leasing almost 20 units a month at rates right now that are about 30% ahead of our pro forma budget. So what we think, and certainly what the Rapids has proved, is that there is a real opportunity, particularly in the uptown market, one, for housing, which is obvious, but two, for luxury housing. You know, we have historically been the Columbus market, an 85 to 90 cent per square foot rental market. Eagle and Phoenix was the high mark up until the Rapids opened at $1.40 or so. Rapids right now is averaging almost $1.70 a square foot. So it's been a tremendous success for us. From there, as you move to the right, the purple building is the hotel. If you read the newspaper, you saw that announcement now, I guess 3 weeks ago when we came through the facade board. We are underway on a 107-unit boutique hotel. I cannot announce the brand because we've not finalized our franchise agreement with the operator. It is not a brand that's in Columbus. Really, it's not a brand that's anywhere around this region. But we're very excited about it. It will open in November of next year. So that construction is underway, and we'll have a larger announcement coming with that. Across Front Avenue, there is a 125,000 square foot Class A office building. If you think about Synovus Center, it is essentially a replica. It doesn't look anything like it. I'll show you what it will look like, but footprint size-wise, it's very similar to Synovus Center on the river. And then we do, in fact, have another 250 residential units that will come probably in 18 to 24 months. We'll start on those. That will be the corner of 13th and Broadway. Both the office and the secondary residential have a retail component as well. So collectively, what you're looking at on the screen here is about 800,000 square feet of space. Represents an investment for Bradley Company of just under $200 million when we're all said and done. As I alluded to earlier, the Rapids is the first phase of this project. This is what that building looks like today. I gave you some statistics when I first started. It's a fabulous building. It's designed around 3 courtyards, the center one, the largest one of which houses the pool and the bar, the bocce ball court, and a number of other outdoor amenities, as well as the second 2 that have grilling stations and kind of outdoor seating and dining in it as well. Fun part about this building, in my opinion, is watching this building grow, and when you do, it looks a little something like this. There at the end, you see Swift Park, which is the centerpiece of our entire development. That park is privately owned by Bradley Company, but is open to the public. It is home to 4 sculpture pieces that we commissioned for public art, as well as a very unique fountain. So if you haven't been down there to see Swift Park, which we named obviously and dedicated for Matt Swift in honor of his 31 years of service at Bradley Company. It's a fabulous park, and again, is open to the public. If you go inside of this building, it looks like this. So these are our kitchens. We have 2 kitchen models. Again, 226 units. It's a mix of studios, 1s and 2s. But these are what those kitchens look like. I mentioned earlier our courtyards. This is the large courtyard here with the swimming pool and bocce ball court and bar area. Heavy amenities. We also have a 24-hour fitness center. We have a club room with an office area, pool table, shuffleboard table, etc. A number of great amenities in this building. Again, this is our leasing office here on the left. So touching just a bit on the history. So all of the wood paneling that you see is actually reclaimed out of Bradley Company's corporate building. Anytime we remodel any part of that building, we save every brick and we save every piece of wood that we take out of the building. We had this wood paneling here milled specifically to go into the Rapids. It's also in our new real estate office. It will be in the Banks Food Hall that I'll talk about in just a minute. And it's also in co-work. So we reuse it wherever we can. One, it's spectacularly beautiful, but 2, it's great for us to kind of talk a little bit back to the history of the company. The hotel that I mentioned, again, you've seen this picture or a similar picture in the paper. This is our next phase that's under construction now. 107 rooms, 7-story hotel. We'll have about 2,500 square feet of meeting space. Also has a swimming pool associated with it. And again, I'd love to tell you the brand. Unfortunately, I just can't yet. So another view of that image looking from the 14th Street, or this building, 14th Street back at the building. The unique part about this is it will have a full-service restaurant, specifically branded for the hotel, separately run. And what you see there on the very top is, in fact, a rooftop bar. It will have full food service up there, as well as covered rooftop bar area. It'll be the only one in Columbus, and obviously overlooking the river like it does. It'll be pretty amazing. We're really excited about it. The office building I made reference to earlier, this is what that building looks like. This building sits, as well as the second multifamily piece, on top of an 1,100-car parking structure. So in addition to everything that I mentioned earlier, we have a very large parking deck to build that will park the retail, as well as the second multifamily piece. This is programmed currently as Phase 3, although we do have a pre-leasing requirement here, self-imposed. We will want this building probably 50% pre-leased before we get started. So, and we got to build the parking deck first anyway, so we have plenty of time. Co-work Columbus. How many of you are familiar with co-work? How many of you are familiar with co-working? All right. So Cowork Columbus is a brand that we created. It is not a new idea. Admittedly, it's an idea we stole. But it is a brand that we created and we own specifically for our co-working environment. So if you're not familiar with co-working, it is best described as a gym membership for offices. So it's a membership-based concept, monthly memberships. It's got a membership fee, same as your gym membership might. And it is all month to month with the exception of the offices. We took the ground floor of Eagle and Phoenix Mill 3, which is the condominium building, which looked like this when we first got started. This is kind of mid-construction. And we have converted it into this co-working environment, which looks like this today. So this has room and seats sufficient for 75 members. There are 6 dedicated offices. Those are private offices, lock and leave. They're yours and yours alone. We have 15 dedicated desks, so that is your desk and your desk alone with lockable drawers, but it is out in the communal area. And then we have what we call flex seating, which is first come, first serve. You can join, as I said, by the month, and we've actually just introduced 2 new memberships. We now have a daily membership, a daily use, so it's a single pay fee. You come in for the day and use it. We've also added a corporate membership. We had a number of companies come to us and said, well, I don't need a desk or an office. What I'd like to be able to do is sign up for a number of memberships and let people kind of rotate through. So we have a base membership as part of that corporate fee, and then you pay basically per person beyond that. This just opened also earlier this year. So far, it's been very successful. The offices, unfortunately or fortunately, are all leased. They do require a 1-year membership, as I said, so they'll be coming back up. But this is an all-inclusive. So high-speed Wi-Fi, fax, copy, if anybody faxes, copying, printing, fully stocked refreshment center, all included. So literally you come in, you sit down, and you go to work. It is as painless as we can make it. Banks Food Hall. This is, frankly, probably the one that I'm most excited about. How many of you are familiar with the food hall concept? Not food court, like the mall, food hall. So this is a gourmet dining concept that we are about to introduce. And this is in a 10,000 square foot building adjacent to Whitewater Express that is actually attached to the back of Bradley Company building. We are taking this space, have taken this space, and are in the process of converting it to what will look like this when we're all finished and the furniture is all located out there. This is the inside of the building. This clicker doesn't want to work. There we go. Looks like this. So there's 10 food stalls inside the building. The red one in the bottom left is the dedicated bar. There is only one, and it is the only place that can serve alcohol. All of the rest are food, kitchens, full kitchens, and service provided at each of those booths. The goal is that we will have ultimately a very unique communal seating, really chef-driven concept restaurant is basically what it is. So you will have 9 different food options, 1 dedicated bar, all in a single building. And then outside in the alleyway where Whitewater Express used to have their rafts and life jackets and everything, will be outdoor seating as well as fun and games. So we'll have a ping pong table out there, shuffleboard table, and then hopefully we will introduce at the right time some live entertainment as well. This building is now finished. The booth operators are going through their design process now. That their design is on them, and then they will build out their booths and be open for business. I had hoped it would be open late this fall. It looks like it's probably going to roll to next year now. And I do want to give credit where credit is due. This is a unique creature that has never existed in Columbus. Conceptually, it's not hard to wrap your head around. Operationally, it is. And I want to give a lot of credit to the city in particular. When we first presented this plan, they understood the plan entirely. What we couldn't figure out is how it was going to work, and that really relates to the alcohol licensing. We have been working with them now for about 45 days to try to figure out how to reach our goal, yet do it in a way that works best for the city. I think we have gotten there. We're waiting on kind of some final words from them. We're in agreement with the direction they want to go. They've been over backwards to help make this a reality, and it wouldn't work without the city helping and stepping in. So This has been an interesting learning curve for everybody involved, I think for the best, and ultimately it will get done, and then we'll be off and running. The health department is wrapping their head around it as well, which is, again, new for them. So we kind of learn on the fly with some of these things, but we're excited about this. If we do our job when we finish, this is what that building will look like on the inside. So, again, these booths run from 340 square feet to about 400 square feet. And it'll be a really, really unique, very special place. How many of you went to Powerhouse last night? Hopefully everybody. Good. So I won't dwell on this too much. I'll show you some great pictures that we had. All of these images that you will see were from last year's Young Life fundraising dinner. We did a seated dinner outside for Young Life for about 400 people. We can handle about 425 on the outside area. The building itself is two structures. They total about 14,000 square feet. And again, it's set up where it is run exclusively as a private event center. It's available for rent by building or the entire facility. So far, it has been very well received. We do not do any catering. We don't do any tables or any chairs or anything like that. For us, we are nothing more than a facility provider. We do have a limited list of caterers that we allow. And then from a seating standpoint, most people use outdoor events, but you could technically use anybody that you chose. Some great pictures from that event last year. Again, you've been in the buildings. I won't belabor the point. You kind of understand what they look like and how this facility operates, having been there last night. I think this is a great image of just some of the possibilities that you can do with the outdoor space, particularly in the evening. And then a great panoramic looking back across that outdoor area. All right, Flat Rock. So back to my earlier comment about adaptive reuse. And this is an interesting facility for us. This warehouse is 180,000 square feet, sits on 80 acres off of Flat Rock Road in northeast Columbus. It was originally built by Bradley Company as a second production facility for Char-Broil. It has not been that in decades, but that's the reason that the building was built originally. We had tenants in there up and through the end of 2017. They came to us and said they were consolidating, and we found ourselves with a 180,000 square foot empty building. With a number of options, everything from sell it to tear it down to do anything else. I had the benefit of being born and raised in Atlanta and was living there, had been since I got out of college. And I had watched what had happened in the film and television industry in and around the Atlanta area as a result of the Georgia Film Tax Credit. Have y'all had a presentation on film in Columbus yet? Okay, good. Well, then I'll tell you all about it. So I went to my board at the end of 17 after a whopping 6 months on the job and said, hey, I've got a great idea. That $500,000 in rent that we just lost, I'd like to leave it off of our budget for next year entirely and see if we can make this thing work. To their credit, they said, look, we like the idea. We think it's interesting. Give it a shot. Gave me just enough rope to hang myself with. And so we did. We're in the finishing process of putting almost $2 million into this building to create what will be Columbus's first true TV and film studio. As I said, the space is about 180,000 square feet. The breakdown on that is roughly 40,000 square feet of office and wardrobe. That's pre and post production, as well as wardrobe, hair, and makeup. And then about 140,000 square feet of stage space. We have that broken into two 35,000 square foot sound stages, each with a corresponding roughly 35,000 square foot workshop space where sets are designed and then physically built, and they roll them onto the stages and do their filming. We have just finished the third production. They wrapped about 3 weeks ago, and we are right now waiting on, we had hoped we were going to have the fourth production starting this week. They've been pushed about 2 weeks. But right now we are tentatively booked all the way through second quarter of next year. Depending on the duration of the films, some of them are in and out in literally a matter of days or a week. This production that just left was almost here 75 days. So it entirely depends on kind of what the production is and how long it takes. I think most everybody is aware Bruce Willis was here earlier in the year. The next production scheduled is he'll actually be coming back. So he's doing another production here, hopefully latter part of this year, rolling into next year. Relative to film in Columbus, since you haven't heard or didn't see a presentation on it, about 12 months ago, the community, not Bradley Company, made the decision that we wanted to try to entice further film and television to come to Columbus in particular. Understanding the $9.5 billion economic impact that it's had for the state of Georgia and the fact that 90% of that stays in Atlanta, we had to get creative with how we could entice film and television producers to Columbus. So we sat down with Peter Bowden at CVB and Columbus State University, who, by the way, their film school is actually based in Flat Rock. So Columbus State University's film production program, set design, set building, hair, and makeup, that entire production facility is all out at Flat Rock. So they're there teaching classes 6 days a week. But we sat down and, along with a fellow named Jeffrey Stepikoff, who you might otherwise not know, he runs the Georgia Film Academy, which is based in Atlanta as a subset under the Board of Regents. We sat down with him and said, all right, well, what's it going to take to really draw film and television to Columbus? And ultimately where we landed is what we today call the Columbus Film Fund. It is a private pool of capital of $5 million that was raised from community donors. And it is designed to essentially be that last step inducement if you're trying to weigh your production between Atlanta or anywhere else to draw you to Columbus. The way that it works is there are all sorts of requirements that the production has to meet in terms of size and budget and everything else, but they are eligible for up to 20% of their local spend. So their contribution that the Film Fund makes to any given production is tied directly to what they spend only in Columbus. They can't take it to, they certainly can't take it to Alabama, unfortunately, because it's a Georgia credit. But they can't take it anywhere outside of all of Muskogee County and parts of Harris County. So it is local spend only. They don't get it for post-production if they take it back to LA for post-production or anything else. We have now approved, so there's a board that runs this fund. We have approved now 5 grants. 4 of them have been used. And it is the last piece. The reason that we have it, without getting too detailed, is primarily union driven. So the film and television industry is heavily unionized. The union controls what they call film hubs. So if you are outside of a 30-mile radius of a film hub, the production has to pick up a per diem for all union workers plus a housing allowance. So depending on what math you believe, that's anywhere from 10 to 20% more on any given production. The Film Fund's goal is that grant is specifically to offset that. So now you're back to apples comparison. We have no traffic. We now have great facilities. We have a ready, willing, and able workforce. We have Columbus State University's film school. So we check a lot of boxes in drawing those productions to Columbus, and so far we've been tremendously successful doing it. All of that we encapsulated, as I said, almost a year ago. A group of us went out to the Sundance Film Festival. It was either end of January or February, I can't remember exactly when, to announce it. There is the largest party at Sundance is called Choose Georgia. It's put on by the Georgia Film Commission. We, in exchange for a sponsorship, got the opportunity to present the Columbus Film Fund at that party, and this is how we did it when we got to Sundance. So the other beauty of that, in case you didn't pick up on it, is there's an awful lot of the best in that video, the best that Columbus has to offer. The other thing that I think is really unique about particularly the Film Fund, but it's beyond just that. It's a lot of the stuff that happens in Columbus. Like I said, I've been in this business for 20 years now. I've developed projects all around the Southeast. And this has become my tagline for Columbus, Georgia, and I mean it with all my heart. I've never seen a community that can do more with an opportunity than what Columbus, Georgia can do. I picked up a family of 5 and moved them down here 2 years ago because I believe that. Obviously, I get the opportunity to work with great people at a great company, but I firmly believe that, as I've said before, I think this town is a fueled jet right at the beginning of the runway. I think we're very early in the growth of what Columbus can be, and I truly believe it's going to be really fun to watch over the next 7 to 10 years and hopefully beyond. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any, or if you're dying for a restroom break, we can do that too. So thank you. Yes?
I have a question in reference to the co-work space.
Yes.
The entrepreneur, and I know we were talking about Startup Columbus and kind of making ways for new people to form businesses here. Are you guys planning on putting in other places other than Uptown Columbus? Because those spaces have coffee houses, they already have spaces there that really people can work or remote in. Is there any type of projection of
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question, if you couldn't hear, was do we plan on taking Cowork Columbus out of Uptown in particular, but I would even broaden the question to out of Columbus. We designed the brand specifically for that. Cowork Columbus could just as easily be Cowork Macon or Cowork Augusta. Ultimately, I think the answer is yes. I couldn't put a time frame on that. The concept really needs to prove itself first in the Uptown area for us to make the investment to take it elsewhere. And it has admittedly been a fairly steep learning curve. The concept of co-working was a little bit foreign. And so we frankly have had to shift a lot of our marketing from traditional marketing to almost more educational marketing, explaining what is co-work and how does it work and why should you consider it. So I think if the concept proves itself, absolutely, we would be willing to take it out of Uptown and out of Columbus. Lots of questions up front.
Your map showed a grocery store at Riverfront Place.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. The ground floor of the office building is designed to be a 28,000 square foot grocery store. Beyond that, I can't elaborate.
Is there a timeline?
Again, we won't start that building until we're half leased, and so that would include the grocery and the office. We are talking to 4 different grocers right now, some local and some national, but we're not anywhere close to signing anybody. Yeah, I got Trader Joe's, Sprouts, I hear them all the time. People want me to shove a Costco in there, but I don't have room. So, yes, Ben.
Yeah, it seems that, with all the property that the Bradley Company has, it seems you've been very meticulous, and I guess what I'm trying to get to is, it seems like there is a long-term strategy by doing it piece by piece, lifting this part up, and then you can move on over here, because I think a lot of people get a little bit impatient. They're like, oh, why won't they do something with this sort of thing? But it seems like there's got to be some master plan if you get the residents in, and then you can go on to something like the Bradley Theater and activate that. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on the master plan strategy of the
Yep.
company?
No, it's a very good question and a great observation, and it's entirely accurate. We operate very different than most traditional developers. And the simplest way to put it is every investment that we make in the real estate division in particular, my team is challenged with taking not just a real estate cycle approach or perspective. Everything we design and everything we build, I have 6 generations of shareholders that I'm reporting to. So we design and build for generations, literally. Our corporate building we've owned since 1885. So we have a very different mindset when it comes to designing, planning, and executing our real estate portfolio. And it is very meticulous for that reason. And so we try to be very particular about how we design it, what it is that we design, and then, as importantly, how we build it, and then ultimately how we execute it. We are not sellers of real estate. Now, that doesn't mean we don't sell stuff. We certainly do. But traditionally, we are not sellers of real estate. We are long-term holders of real estate. And so there is a strategy behind it. I won't bore you with all the details, but you're right. I mean, each piece builds from the prior piece. So you need rooftops and permanent residence to bring retail and grocery and entertainment, and each piece leads to the next. Riverfront Place alone ultimately will add 1,000 full-time residents to the uptown area. Now you can have meaningful conversations with grocery stores and entertainment venues like Bradley Theater. So it is somewhat meticulous, and it may seem illogical at times, but I promise you it's not. And it will take a little while to get there, but we'll get there. What else? All right. Thank you very much.
After this is our third presentation this afternoon. It's after these presentations, you don't sense a sense of awe and pride. Somebody needs to check your pulse, because there's a lot of good things going on in this community as you've seen over the last couple of days. And there's a lot more coming, as Pace has indicated, and there's a lot more coming after this break we want to talk about. But before we break, don't hop up yet on me. You need to grab your cell phones and make sure you have your settings set for the Wi-Fi here, the free Wi-Fi here in the museum, because that's going to be important to you when we come back after the break, because you're going to need to be able to utilize that and help us out with some issues as well. So go to your phones, if you will, during the break. Set your Wi-Fi settings to the free Infantry Museum site, and when we come back, we'll tell you what we're going to do with that. We're going to take about a 10-minute break here and get back about 2:30. All right? I want to ask the staff from the planning department to come up here and join me just for a second before I introduce Pam. Over the last 2 days, the mayor has been laying on pretty thick about how wonderful I am, which I agree. And about Richard Bishop also, about how wonderful he is, which I agree also. But I'm missing a couple of folks here. What y'all do? I'm not waiting for that. I want you to meet the real heroes of these last 2 days involved with it, because we're getting ready to close up here in just a little while. This is Millicent Burden down here. Millicent is my administrative assistant. She's the one to make sure I don't go off into the ditch, which is a real occurrence in our office. Addie Britt is our up and coming young star in transportation planning. You're going to see a lot of Addie over the next couple of years or so here. I hope you will. Hope she'll hang around with us that long to do that. But she's got a lot of great ideas and a lot of good things going on. This is Mike Mixon. Mike is he's our senior citizen. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and say it. Mike, though, is of course retired military, but he's also one of our planners as well, who helps us do some things and has helped us in terms of scheduling this. John Renfro is a landscape architect and a planner, which we're very happy to have on board with us from here. In fact, the little booklet you've been carrying around with you, this is all John. So I want you to know where that idea came from. Who have we got here? Trey Wilkerson is another one of our planners. Some of you see him now when we're dealing with historical properties in the community, particularly Board of Historical and Architectural Review. He is that key component to that, and he's also helped us with a lot of the presentations and PowerPoints and making sure all that comes up here as well. Send the bearded one up here also. Dave Cooper, immediately to my right here, is our GIS technician. He's the one, I really want to tell you about Dave real quick here. When you got on the bus, this is really important to me. The story maps that you get pulled up off your phone, those are all Dave. Dave put that together for you so that you could have a way of understanding some things that are going on in the tour. Nothing against Metro buses, but when you get on sometime to do a tour, and I've done that too many times, it's very, very hard to hear yourself think sometimes. And we just realized that was the best way for you to understand what was going on in these tours. Last but certainly not least is Will Johnson here, who's our planning manager. Will handles a lot of the land use stuff we've got going on with zoning and so forth. John Renfro is also our zoning administrator as well, but Will handles a lot of the stuff we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis with land use. I want you to know how extremely proud I am of this group and the work they have put together, and I hope you'll join me in giving you your well of thanks to them. Okay, I'm through with you. Go. Couldn't do it without them, folks. Really, honest, we could not. This would not be easy. The last two sessions we want to share with you are going to come from staff itself here. We want to talk about projects, particularly in the South Columbus area, and things that we are looking at long range with you as well, which you're going to have to give us some help on. That's the reason I asked you before the break that you go into the Wi-Fi and tie into the one here at the Infantry Museum, the free one, because for one thing, I think some of you have already found, I know I had the cell service out here is a little spotty, to say the least. And so we hope this is going to work using the Wi-Fi. We're going to show you that in just a minute. Let me introduce Pam Hodge, who's our Deputy City Manager for Planning and Development and Finance and anything else that Isaiah wants her to do. She's doing a great job for us, and she's here today to talk to you about projects that have been ongoing and are ongoing in South Columbus. So please give Pam a warm welcome.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm supposed to talk today about specifically projects that's been going on in South Columbus. You saw a lot of these in the bus tour, but you probably couldn't hear any narration that was talking about those projects. So I'm here to just go through a lot of the projects in South Columbus, some that have happened in the past, currently underway, and then some of the future plans for South Columbus. If you have any questions, Ryan Pruitt is here. He's from our engineering department. He's our project manager and manages all of these projects once design is ready for construction. So he's here if there's any specific questions as well about projects. Currently, within the last several years, and those that are under construction now and design, we have $327 million worth of projects throughout the city of Columbus. And I've broken those out in just different areas of the city. 220 million of that 327 is in South Columbus. And I'm going to walk through a lot of those projects. We drove by quite a few of those today, just so you can see that the city has invested along with GDOT in a lot of infrastructure projects in the South Columbus region. North Columbus, 18 million, East Columbus, 21 million, Uptown and West Columbus, 13 million, the Panhandle, just under $1 million, and Midtown, 52 million. So a lot of things going on all over Columbus. 220 million in South Columbus alone. We looked, I think, Andy showed some pictures of this earlier, which is the Fort Benning Gateway. This is a magnificent project leading into Fort Benning on 185. This was a $6.8 million project. Next, we drove over the Brown Avenue Bridge. This was a GDOT project, $8.5 million project. This bridge was in disrepair. We couldn't even drive vehicles over it for a while, and it definitely provided a disconnect for those two communities. This was a huge project that Councilor Woodson, and I don't know that I saw her today, she was here yesterday, was really a leader in getting this project completed. The Follow Me Trail, we drove by that also today. That was a $3.5 million project. And again, we talked about the connection that will be from the Follow Me Trail over to the Riverwalk along a new road that will tie in Benning Road with South Lumpkin Road there at the roundabout. The Follow Me Trail Bridge, this was to get the Follow Me Trail over Victory Drive. This was a $2 million project just to put the bridge to allow that pedestrian and traffic to move across Victory Drive safely. we go. Martin Luther King Jr. Streetscapes, we also did the resurfacing project. This was a $4.1 million project. We drove down a portion of MLK today. It's a great asset to that area of the community and really changed how that particular road looked when you drove down Martin Luther King. And they're all, we also talked about on our bus about Ronzel Buckner and the Martin Luther King Jr. Learning Trail. There'll be some markers put up all the way down, 11 markers that was part of the Together 2016 project, and they'll put markers all the way down Martin Luther King as a learning trail. The Fort Benning Road Roundabout and Streetscapes, this is a $17 million project. This is really kind of three projects in one. This is the roundabout, which will realign Brennan Road, Fort Benning Road. Also streetscapes all the way to the gate. A portion of that from Shelby to the gate has been completed. You saw the beginnings of the streetscape project. This is the roundabout, which we drove by today. There's sidewalks on one side, and then the trail will be on the other side, and there'll be a connection down Shelby to get to the Follow Me Trail, so you can get over Victory Drive. This is a huge project for this area of the community, the Buena Vista Spiderweb project. This is a $48 million project. This was one of our T-Splost projects. This will take the traffic over the railroad tracks, which is a huge hindrance for those folks in that area of the community trying to get to work and home. It seems like the train comes by just when you're running late for work. And it's going to stop right in the middle of the road on Buena Vista. And so that will be a huge project for this area. We're under design currently, right-of-way acquisition. We've demolished the warehouse that sat on the north side of the road, as well as some apartment buildings, and we're in negotiations for additional right-of-way in that particular area to complete that project and begin construction. The Buena Vista 185 interchange, this will be a new concept to Columbus, a diverging diamond. So for those of you who have been to Atlanta, you've traveled on a diverging diamond and you probably got to the other side and didn't realize that you were on the other side of the road. We will have this in Columbus. There's another one going in on Bradley Park over J.R. Allen, so we'll end up with two diverging diamonds in our community. So if you just follow the person in front of you, you'll make it to the other side, and then you'll wonder how you were on the wrong side of the road. But this is a $40 million project. This project, because it does deal with federal highways, will be managed by GDOT, but it is a locally funded T-Splost project. We're also adding an interchange at Casita Road and 185. This will really open up this particular area of our community for economic development. Right now, it's kind of blocked off to get from Casita Road. You either have to go down to Victory Drive to get on 185 or go up to St. Mary's Road. So adding this interchange at Casita Road will really open up that area. And this is one of the concepts. This is kind of the proposed concept that they're moving forward with. We do have permission from Federal Highways to allow an interchange at this particular location, which was a major hurdle to get over. Again, GDOT will be managing this project for us, and they're working on design at this time. This is a $58 million project, and again, a T-Splost project. Other projects that have happened in the South Columbus area includes Victory Drive improvements. When the Walmart went in, there were some major improvements there on Victory Drive. We've done stormwater improvements at Casita Road and Levy Road. 185 Custer Road, US 27 interchange, that was a $20 million T-Splost project. The Riverwalk Westville parking, we partnered with Westville, and we also added a parking lot so that you can park in that parking lot and have access to the Riverwalk as well as Westville. Benning Drive Bridge replacement, that was $1.8 million. There'll be a signal put in place at Victory Drive and 30th Avenue. Levy Road improvements, The Infantry Road and Trail, we've talked about that east-west connector, as well as the north-south connector. That's something that we're working on currently. And we hadn't talked about, I think Laura mentioned this in her presentation yesterday about the Georgia Ports Authority project, the removal of those tanks, which will allow for that project or that parcel to be utilized for economic development, as well as the Clarendon Bridge. That's another one that's $700,000. Past projects, some of those you've heard about today. The city had some participation in some of these projects. The National Infantry Museum where we sit, this property was owned by the city. Oxbow Meadows, the 6th Avenue Flood Abatement and Streetscapes Project, Old Camp Landfill, Casita Road Pedestrian Bridge, the Westville relocation. We had a presentation on that today as well. North Star, St. Mary's Road. So a lot of infrastructure improvements in South Columbus. Future projects, the Farmers Market on 10th Avenue, that will be another project that I think Laura mentioned yesterday in the Brownsfield discussion. Liberty District, the South Lumpkin Streetscapes, the corridor, major corridor that comes into the Infantry Museum in Westville, looking at streetscapes and improvements to the South Lumpkin Road when you get off of Victory Drive. Casita Road improvements, if we went down Casita Road today, you would see that that's a major corridor that needs some care. There's, it looked kind of like MLK did before, and it really could use the same type of improvements, as well as additional trail extensions. We've continued to expand the trail system in Columbus. That's some of the things that millennials are looking for, is that type of walkability, bikeability, to be able to get from one place to another, so that connection is important. So at this time, I'll just open it up for questions. If you have any specific questions about any of the projects or future projects, or if you have ideas for other things that you think would make improvements, not just in South Columbus, but throughout the city, we're always open to listening to the public. That's what we're here for, is to provide infrastructure for our citizens. So,
Hey, where do we stand on the tank cleanup at South Collins?
we are going to start that October the 31st. We're going to have a press conference at 10 o'clock that morning to start the removal of the tanks. Jim or Will, I think both of y'all.
How many, the projects, the future projects that you mentioned, the Spiderweb, the 185 is all T-SPLOST funds from this past T-SPLOST. Anything in that want list for a future T-SPLOST opportunity?
There will be a development of a T-SPLOST list for the next round. The other counties, something that we haven't talked about a lot, the other counties have all put in a resolution to extend the T-SPLOST. Our city council has chose to move in a different direction, so at this time has not put in a resolution for support at this time. But even moving forward, we'll have to develop a list of T-SPLOST projects, so that's something that will be forthcoming.
And that's not any of what we saw?
No, nothing that we saw had anything to do with a future T-SPLOST. Jim?
Yeah, so we talked about some of the city projects. Can you go through some of the school board projects and the housing authority projects in South Columbus as well?
I can name the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, but Baker Village was replaced by the Housing Authority. We had Patriot Point, Arbor Point was the Baker Village project, the Patriot Point. Spencer High School is a new South Columbus high school that will also have a sports complex with it. Carver High School was recently done. Is there others, Kathy, or?
There's so much. If you go on the YouTube and search, I don't know who asked that question, but if you search on YouTube for MCSD, you will come to our channel and there's like a 2-minute PowerPoint presentation just on what we've accomplished in the last SPLOST as we're sort of finalizing everything and looking towards the next. So, great question. I encourage you. I shared it on my Facebook page a couple days ago, but it goes through the whole gamut of every athletic field, the wings we've added, the schools we've added. So there's a lot.
So a lot of infrastructure from all organizations been added, not just in South Columbus, but throughout the city. Betsy, I think.
That is a thank you and a little bit of an elaboration, if you'll allow, just from a Columbus 2025 Vibrant Connected Places standpoint. The trail network, the city has been enormously supportive of our development of the Dragonfly Trail Network. It's an off-road system of trails that'll eventually be about 75 miles throughout Muskogee County. And you are exactly right, it's something that millennials want, but it's also something that people who don't have access to cars need to be able to get to work. It's important for public health in the community to be able to support people being able to get out and walk together, bicycle together, skateboard, push a baby stroller, whatever they want to do. And it's off-road and it's safe and fully protected from cars. So I think just from that standpoint, as we look at what's happening in South Columbus, where you have populations that we struggle to reach with public transportation, a trail network can offer a great alternative to help people get to work safely. So thank you for that. Keep doing it, but let's all remember it's a pretty broad system of check boxes that we're hitting through these trails.
From my perspective at New Horizon, we have a saying that connection is the opposite of addiction. And to see what you're doing to connect these neighborhoods, that exit coming off Cedar Road is going to be fantastic to open up that neighborhood to the community, to open up economic opportunities for folks, for businesses, for people in those neighborhoods to feel connected to the community as a whole. And I just think it's great what y'all are doing down in that area and really looking for a change for those people's lives that are living down there.
Thank you.
In the first round of T-Splosh, Pam, what's the total amount that's been spent in Muskogee County on projects?
Let me do the math in my head real quick. That's 20, 30, I'm trying to think, 30, there's 52. We're in that neighborhood between 55 and about 75 million we've spent initially right now.
And then
No, we're not talking about
those two slides showed like 90 to 100 million.
Well, you got the spider web, and you got the Casita Road, and
Yeah.
the one out there at the interchange.
Which is another 150 million.
Yeah, so we're in that process now.
So like over 200.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well over 200.
Wow.
I can't see who it is, but it's kind of dark.
Sorry. One of the things that I think the true connection with the concrete and steel that y'all are working on is truly superb. But with the landscaping sometimes that's chosen surrounding these transportation infrastructure networks are very homogeneous, and they require a lot of energy and chemicals to maintain, and oftentimes not maintained with the proper care to even keep them in a thriving state. Have y'all looked at that as in a way of reestablishing native plantings, as well as just a mix of wild, semi-wild, and kind of better maintained, I guess, living systems, biological systems that would further enhance this network that you're building?
And that's something that we've recently had discussions about, is with the River Road roundabout as well as the Fort Benning Road roundabout, is to really bring in some local landscape architects to provide assistance. A lot of times our architects and engineers are from firms that are not necessarily located here, and so some of the plantings that they put into those roundabouts might not necessarily be the best for Columbus. So we've had recent discussions. We also utilize Public Works and our arborist to review the plans to make sure that the plantings meet the specifications from our city arborists. So we do review those. A lot of times, the first year of maintenance falls back onto the contractor. And that's part of our construction contract is the 1 year of maintenance, and then the city takes over that maintenance. So if you have specific ideas about plantings, we go through our city arborists for those types of review, but we're always open to listening to other ideas about how that could be better.
So that has to go through the city arborist?
Yes, they review the plans for any of those.
Is the city arborist specifically dealing with just trees, or is it all of the landscape?
They deal with all of the landscape. Is there any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. I think you can see that there's been a lot of investment made all through the community, particularly in the South Columbus area, and that's we get that question a lot about why aren't you doing more in South Columbus? Well, we're trying, and we keep trying on a day-to-day basis. But just know that we're working on projects and trying to do some things. So, all right, let's go if we can. Not to the debate, please. That's the last thing we need today. All right, grab your phones. Here we go. We want you to go here. If you need to be on at least on the Wi-Fi for this, please. And what we're looking at is you go into this website here called Menti. What the heck? MENTI.com. Okay. Pull that up on your phone, please. First, go to your web browser. Find and type in Menti.com. And then we're going to ask you in just a second here to type in the code number 934594. What we are about to do is ask you to go through and give us some feedback here on things we got coming up here and things we want to talk to you about in closing here this afternoon. It is no mystery, it is no great big secret, no government secret here, that this local government is looking at now proposing to go out for another splosh in this next go around. We're going to show you a little bit about that in terms of doing that by next November of 2020. So that's no big mystery. It's also no big mystery that the government center has been a topic of that splosh. We're not hiding that from you, anybody, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, not a great deal. But just know that that's one of the things that's driving the splosh itself. But there are other things in the community we need to be talking about and looking at as well in terms of how we're going to make that happen and what we need to do in terms of different projects. So, before I go any further, are you with me so far on the Menti part? It's blank. It should be blank. That's fine. You got a blue screen on there. It doesn't mean not the blue screen of death. Just know you got to have a blue screen. You're great. Y'all have me worried there for a second. All right, now, we need to try to do this as best we can, and Will and whoever else can help me on this real quick. If you're going to vote, how about hold your phone up so we can count real quick and get some kind of idea of who all's played in this game, okay? Hold them up high so Will can count. He may have to take his shoes off to make this happen, but let's let him count real quick for us. Okay? He's still counting. Hold him up for him so he can count.
$60.
60, that's a good number. Okay. You're going to see in just a second the importance of that number when we get started here. Give me catch up with you just 1 second. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do here is ask you some basic questions about things going on in Columbus and what you'd like to see happen in Columbus based on some of the projects we're talking about, or things you'd like to see project-wise more than anything else. Okay. Let's go to the first slide, Trey, if you can. Can you move us that way? All right. Question number 1 is, how long have you lived in Columbus? And you have 0 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and 16 or more. Down the lower right-hand corner is that number. It tells me how many folks have actually voted. And I don't want to move on until we get to a reasonable number here, so I want to give you a chance to vote. How long have you lived in Columbus? Okay. So it appears that, of course, the majority of you have lived. Oh, what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the code?
Yeah, Trey, hit the top up there and drop the code back down for us. It is 934594. You see at the top there? 93. That's the code we're looking for now. 934594. You type in. Okay? 93. Okay. So going back to the question here real quick. The question shows basically that there's 50 of you who've been here at least 16 years or more. So you have a good history here in Columbus. Okay? So now we've established that baseline. Let's go to the next one. All right. The quality of life in Columbus is what? You have 4 choices down here: excellent, good, fair, poor, whatever. Okay, I think we're there. Not to finger anybody in the room here. Anybody who voted fair want to say why?
It defeats the purpose of this process.
Okay. Anonymity is a good deal. You're right. Excuse me. I forgot where I was. Okay. Let's go. All right. Let's go to the next one then. Columbus is a great place to live and work. Strongly agree, somewhat agree, neither agree or disagree, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. Okay? Kind of interesting there how it almost balances out between strongly agree and somewhat agree. And then, of course, there's a couple of us in here that say somewhat disagree. Interesting feedback on that.
Rick, I would say the feedback on those would be, my question is, did you mean for me, or did you mean for the general person?
No, I mean for you. I'm not asking the general populace here. I'm asking for you to tell me how you feel about Columbus. Okay? Let's move on. Let's go to the next one. My reason for living in Columbus is, and it's kind of hard to see down here, but you'll see it on your phones, I hope. Affordable housing, property taxes, city services, police, fire, and sanitation. I grew up here. Parks and recreation, quality, variety of housing, quality of life. What do I got down the end then? I can't see today. Schools. Yeah, schools or none of the above. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Reynolds, I've got to ask this one now, without giving anybody away. There were 32 of you here that were saying, for some other reason. Somebody tell me what your other reason is, because jobs, okay, what else? Family's here, okay, that's great, what else? What, I'm sorry to hear that last one. Okay. All right. So there is a variety of reasons up for the other category as well. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Would you recommend Columbus to others as a place to live? Yes, without a doubt. No, are you kidding? Or just unsure?
My student, we play a lot of good class, so whoever answers first gets the most points. It's a different app, sorry.
That's the whole suite, I think.
We're almost there. Need a couple more here. Okay. All right. So again, it's an interesting response here in terms of what we're getting. Let's go on to question number 6. Direction of Columbus. Columbus is heading in the right direction. Columbus is is on the wrong track. No, don't know, no answer. What's your thoughts? Okay. Again, another interesting response here, and what we're getting involved with this. I mean, the majority of it say that Columbus is heading in the right direction. What concerns us, I think, should concern us, is how do we get these other folks who don't know or don't have an answer, or even the one or two that thinks we're on the wrong. How do we convert that and change that for the betterment, for the positive here of making sure we're all heading in the right direction as a community? But I appreciate the responses. They're great. Number 7. Overall, I feel that our government facilities are in good shape. Strongly agree, somewhat agree, neither agree or disagree, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. Wow, I'm really disappointed nobody says strongly agree. We got some things we got to really address here. Someone who voted for it and somewhat disagree. You want to share why? Why you feel it's the government facilities aren't in that good a shape?
Well, some are and some aren't.
Okay, good. That's what we need to hear. So, okay, somebody else got a different answer?
Well, I mean, y'all made a good point with the tool today. I think that Will said 70% of our housing inventory is 60-plus years old. We just have a lot of old structures in this community.
Okay. All right. So I think we can take away from this slide, Jim, that we don't think our community, our government facilities are in good shape. Okay? Good. Let's move on. Number 8, considering all the services the city provides and all the taxes you pay, which of the following statements comes closest to your view? I prefer to keep taxes and services about where they are, prefer to decrease taxes and decrease services, prefer to raise taxes and increase services. None of these, again, don't know.
Increase taxes and increase services.
This is kind of a thinker question here, so. Number for what now?
934590.
Need just a couple more here. Okay. All right. Okay. What's your thoughts on this one? You're looking at the same information I am. What are your thoughts? What are you taking away from this slide?
It's inconclusive, really, because of all the none of these don't count. If you take that 19 and add them onto the first or the third, you could do either of those depending on how somebody interpreted that question.
Okay.
It depends on where kill the tax freeze would fall. So if that was like a category, I would definitely vote for that one.
Okay. We have beat that dead horse and dragged it around the barn and through the field, and I don't think we're ready to do that again anytime soon. All right. What else? What else? Somebody else got another takeaway on this slide? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe that people want more services, and if it means getting more taxes, then they're willing to have it to get those additional services.
Okay, did y'all hear that? That if people want more services, they're basically have to pay more taxes. Is that what that good paraphrase? They're willing to do it. Okay. What else? Huh? Different. No, but you represented this room here, and that's fine.
These are only individual responses, so there's 23 people in the room that responded yes to that.
Yeah. You 23, we want you at council when we do the next budget, so you can remind council members and our mayor that you want to both raise taxes and increase service, which I'm not trying to slight here by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think it's kind of an interesting thought here in terms of how these have actually really played out more than anything else. Anybody else got any thoughts about this one and how we voted? No right or wrong answers for the most part on this. Okay? I heard that. All right, let's go on to the next one. Number 9, if funds are available, the priority for projects to improve infrastructure in the city is, we got road improvements, which is new and widening and so forth, stormwater, recreational, government facilities, maintenance and new facilities, public safety.
Are schools in the government facilities category?
I'm sorry?
Are schools included?
No, schools are not part of this deal. That's a different topic. Please see Kathy Williams for that.
How do you define government facility?
Anything that houses a government agency, government administration, it could be courts, it could be, like I said, general administration, it could be anything, again, that requires the housing of government. I'm sorry?
Public housing again?
No, public housing is not. This is only talking about city facilities now. We're not talking about public housing. We're not talking about the school district. We're talking about only those things that the city is actually controls and is responsible for. Just a couple more. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so how much, for those of you who voted on government facilities, how much influence is the previous slide we had about the condition of government facility played into your decision here? Is it, if it plays at all? You understand what I'm asking? We had a slide, a couple of slides before that said, I think the government facilities are in great shape or in a lousy shape, whatever the case may be. I want to know if that they influenced you in any way, though, about voting on this particular slide. Did it? I have one back there, but he doesn't count.
Well, it depends on, talking about maintenance or new facilities.
I'm sorry,
There's a difference between maintenance and new facilities.
right. But keep in mind, one of the things that we hear on a constant basis also is you're building all these nice new facilities, but you're not providing any maintenance for them. I mean, so we got to figure that into the equation here somehow or another, and that's why I get the question's phrased that way.
Had maintenance on it.
I'm sorry?
That was the only one that had maintenance on it.
Okay. Well, there's really, I guess, road improvements has something to that effect as well, but, okay. Point well taken on that. Okay. What else? Anything? All right, so government facilities, then comes road improvements, new roads and whatnot, and then recreation behind that. But then you got public safety still scores very big in this thing too. In fact, that actually comes in second. And that's a,
Public safety infrastructure is different than public safety salary benefits.
Right.
That sort of.
right. This is actually providing the equipment, again, the buildings and so forth for public safety, more so than you would actually provide additional funding and so forth. Now, we'll explain that in a little bit more in just a second here as well. Okay, let's go on to number 10. Currently, there are several sources of funding that may be available to the city for infrastructure projects. My preference for funding for the city to use to pay these projects is special purpose, local option sales tax, or bond issue. Pam, is there anything we need to say or clarify about that? I mean, to make sure everybody understands. Everybody understand what special purpose local option sales tax is versus a bond issue?
One's debt, and one's not. One's income, one's debt.
Okay?
We tax people who waste resources, like overuse of water or pollute. I'm serious. I mean, can we tax those people who destroy our environment?
I'm not qualified to answer that question. Pretty straightforward, but that's the best way I know the answer. All right, just a few more here. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else want to vote? I think we got a pretty good idea of how that one fleshes out here. That you're looking at primarily doing more along a SPLOST, which is basically providing yourself another penny tax, 1% tax on your sales tax and so forth from that. We've always sold that notion that not only do we pay it, but those visitors who come to Columbus pay it for it also. And so it kind of spreads the responsibility over everybody else involved with it. So, okay. All these questions are leading up to something else here. We have an ulterior motive. Okay, so let's go on to the next one here. All right, let's talk about special purpose local option sales tax so that you have a full understanding about what we're talking about here now. In dealing with this, it's up to 1% sales tax. It can only be used for capital outlay projects. It cannot be used for salaries. God knows I wish it could. Because we've got folks in general government just as well as public safety that need to have an increase in pay as well, but we can't do it for that. So we can only use for things like roads, bridges, sidewalks, trails, stormwater, those kind of things is what a SPLOST can be done. Again, it cannot be used for operating expenses or maintenance. It can be imposed it's imposed for a maximum of 5 years. That probably statement needs to come out, except be imposed by a consolidated government when it's a general obligation GO debt and it's issued in conjunction with the SPLOST. Pam, help us with that one.
So the way a SPLOST works is as a consolidated government, if a general obligation bond is issued at the same time a SPLOST is approved, then the SPLOST is collected until the dollar value is reached. The school district is different. Their collection is for a 5-year period, but for a consolidated government, it can go longer than that. So if we have additional projects that would exceed past 5 years, it would go until that collection is done.
Okay? So that's This is the basis for what, the basic definition for what a SPLOST is and what we can and can't do with it, more than anything else. All right, let's go on to the next one. All right, I support a judicial complex housing all courts to enhance public safety and be more accessible to the general public. Strong support all the way down to strongly do not support. Just a few more. Okay. At least 36 of you are strongly supporting of a judicial complex housing all this. Again, there's no big mystery. There's no secret to it. We got an issue in how we deal with our court system and the courts we've got in this county now, and we got to do something about that. So, and keep in mind, from my perspective anyway, we're not just talking about how we handle them today, but how we handle them over the next 20-year time frame or longer. So we're not just looking trying to have that tunnel vision here of just trying to take care of the problem today. We're trying to look at 20 and 30 years out or more, how we address that as well. Somewhat support, neither, and then strongly do not support. That's good information to have. And I want to take a brief second here to tell you something real quick about this whole kind of thing here. In dealing with in the planning world, when we go out and do public meetings and so forth, we try to initiate the public as much as we possibly can. We try to interact with them. We've had meetings in the past where we'll stand up in our suits and so forth, and we'll say, this is our project, and this is what we're trying to do. And we'll stand in front of a crowd like this, and then it either turns into a shouting match or a riot or a lynching, however you want to say it, because there's undoubtedly there's like 3 or 4 people in that room, not in this room, 3 or 4 people in that room that want to command and control that. This tool right here gives us that ability for folks to anonymously tell us how they think about something. If they want to go into more detail and so forth, that's what we're trying to achieve. But we want to give everybody a voice in what's being asked. So this is why it's important, and we know how many we got and so forth. But this is good information for us to have, and so we can massage it. We'll share that back with council members, with the mayor and city manager as well. But that's why we're going through some of this process, just so you know some of the background. Okay, let's go to the next. Let's go to number 12. How would you rate the present government center complex? Great building, good building, just needs a little work. The building is fine. Whoa, it could use some work. Take it down and start over. Those are your choices. That's a good question. That's what we're working on. This is just general opinion now. If I won't say money's no object, but just right now, general question. Okay? Give a few more of you a chance to respond. Couple more? Okay. Looks like the majority of you say that we ought to take it down and start over. If you have not, and I'm going to say this again from a personal opinion more than anything, if you have not watched a council meeting particularly when the issue of the government center comes up, you have not watched 10 people try to wrangle with this and come to a real decision, because there's a lot of moving parts in dealing with this idea about what we do with the government center itself. That's what they need the feedback for. Not to say they're going to make their decision totally on this, but they need to know what you're thinking also as we go along. And like I said, it appears that we should take it down and pretty much start over. Okay? Let's go on to number 13. What option would you support for the government center? Now, we're not talking about, what am I trying to think here? Well, let me just go on. We're asking, do you want all new facilities on the existing site? Do you want all new facilities on a new site? Do you want the renovation of the current government center? What would you like? Need just a few more. Couple more?
Yeah, but can I just make a request for the record? I think this is informative and it's interesting, but from given that there are media in the room who are likely to represent that the attendees on this trip think this, I just want to point out that an option that we may not have all the answers yet and we may not have made up our mind wasn't an option for those. Right.
Okay.
So I feel a little bit like we're getting pushed into a conclusion that I'm not sure I'm really ready for. I just want to note that for the record.
Okay. Tim, you noting that?
I'm not even right.
Just in case you are, Tim, keep us in mind. It's kind of even interesting how it's almost, not quite, but how it kind of goes across the board here. Again, if you're having a tough time making a determination about this, imagine how your council members are having this as well. They are wrestling with this. I'm not making excuses for them. They're not making excuses for me. I'm just saying this is going to be a tough decision to make, and they're looking for input. Okay? Let's go on to the next one. Trey, let's go to the, there you go. All right, these are the actual tax rates as they are right now, going through year 2023 here. You have state and state, the lost and the lost here. Those are established. You have the E-Splosh, which the school board is ready to go, I guess, now in March. Kathy, y'all going March?
Yes, sir.
March on that. So that makes that determination about, again, you get to vote on that where you want to add another penny to tax for that and so forth. T-Splosh, we talked about a little bit earlier here. This is when it actually runs out in 2022 right now, the existing one. There is a proposal on the table now for another one to come forward. Again, in my humble opinion, I expect the entire region will come forward with that, minus Columbus, just knowing what I know about it right now. Then the Splosh itself would add probably another penny in 21 and 22 here. And you can see across the bottom here the total for this 8, 7, 8, and then eventually 7 here again. So we tried to phrase this next question based off this table here, so you understand what we're dealing with in terms of actual taxes now, sales tax and so forth. All right, let's go to the next one now. So to achieve the necessary critical capital improvements, the sales tax would temporarily go from 8% to 9% for at least 21 months. Would you be willing to support that?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What the tax rate is in Phoenix City currently? 9.5%.
9.5 in Phoenix City.
All right.
Okay? I'm sorry, I see a hand back there. I'm not considering any exemption, I'm just saying straight up, would you support a sales tax? I'm sure there's a list longer than my arm for exemptions, but
Ricky, does this go under the assumption that another East Lost is passed or not?
not, you're saying yes, I'm sorry, we're saying yes. For that 21 months, yes. Okay? Need a few more of you to vote.
The East Lost is the education. I'm not real sure. The T is the. Oh, the transportation.
All right, just a couple more votes. We're getting ready to close the poll on this one. All right, so it appears that 46 of you who voted on this thing would actually support that, going from 8 to 9% over that 21-month period. So that's interesting. Okay. Let's go on to the next one then, please. All right. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Just to clarify, it would go from 8% to 9% if the E-SPLOS was passed and a SPLOS was passed, that would take it to 9%. The T-SPLOS would come off, it would go back to 8. The T-SPLOS was passed, it would stay at 9.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right. We're going to give you some funny money here now. We want you to say you have $100 in your pocket, and you are going to spend it basically on projects, basically capital projects. You have $100 to spend, using we don't have a project sheet passed out, but knowing the projects that we've talked about and you've seen and things that are going on here, we want you to decide how you would spend that money. What category would you spend your $100 on? Now, we're going to show you a list here in just a second. You may spend it all on one category. You may break it up. You may want to say, I want to spend $22 here and $13 here, whatever the case may be. But just know that you can't spend more than $100, okay? So let's go here. Let's go to the next one. And where would you spend your $100?
Is this additional?
Just a couple more minutes and then we need to move on. Okay. This is tough, isn't it? I mean, when you got just so much money to spend on certain things, this is tough. And this is what we're dealing with here now. But the importance of this one is we need to have some idea about where we should be concentrating our efforts. What should we be looking at and where we should be going with, in what direction.
I just have a comment on this.
Absolutely, go ahead.
The people we have here in this room, we're largely economic development. It's a big thing we've talked about in the last 2 days.
Correct.
This room is not represented by the whole Columbus.
Correct. And I hear that, and I'm going to explain that to you a little bit more in just a little more detail here. By this good comment.
I'm going to be reporting on this, like you said.
Okay.
And so I think you'll have a big discussion at the board meeting.
Okay.
And also in the newspapers. So I strongly support economic development, but I think you're going to have a lot of people that say roads and transportation and public safety.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion.
Anybody else got any comments about this particular slide and the results? Anything you want to share or ask? Yes, sir.
How do you spend that much on economic development? Like, what would you spend your money on?
What I
Public safety, that's a ton of full-time employees. Like, how do you put that much money towards economic development?
It could be a particular project we're trying to enhance, that you want to deal, that you want to try to encourage to come in, something that you want to kind of leverage that. I'm drawing a real blank on that right now, but it would be anything that has a goal of what we're trying to do as far as improving economic development that would entice folks to come here, new jobs, whatever. That could be new roadway systems, that could be whatever the case may be on
Would
that.
there be money towards the Development Authority, which is partially in charge of economic development?
As long as it's not dealing with salaries and so forth, I think we were fine in that regard, yeah. We could
It's
be.
not like a personal, you didn't
No.
give us a personal $100, you wanted us to spend.
I want you to, well, in all honesty, I'm not trying to be funny about this, but your tax dollars are basically it's your money.
Well, the SPOS dollars have some parameters on how you can spend it though. versus-
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, it's not just, we can write a blank check for that. Anybody else got any questions or comments on this? Yes, sir.
Law enforcement is 100, police department in Columbus is 100 officers short. The sheriff's office is 34 or 35 short. So definitely if you get up to where we need to be as safe as we need to be.
Well, but again, keep in mind now, we can't use these for salaries. We can't hire new police officers for this money, okay? All you can do is anything that has a capital value to it, capital improvement.
But you could put more police assistants, police stations in more parts of town, closer to the areas.
Okay, I'm gonna have to leave that alone for a second. Okay, let's just go on with that. All right, any last closing comments or questions on this one? Huh? Roll it. All right. So that's it for the most part here. Let's go to the next slide, Troy. Here, this is if we start off this conversation here this afternoon, we are in the process of going through and setting up this next SPLOST itself. Pam, you're basically ramrod this thing. You want to talk about the process and where we are on this?
So the timeline for the 2020, November 2020 ballot for the SPLOST, we've set up our first series of public meetings. So this group might have voted one way. Some of these questions we'll use at public meetings. So we'll get information from all districts throughout Columbus. So we'll hear from all citizens who attend these meetings. So anytime we do public meetings, we hear different things from different parts of the community as to what their priority is. So in one area of town, it might be parks and recreation. In another area of town, it might be public safety. So these questions only represent this group, but we'll hear from lots of different individuals to be able to kind of provide council with that type of information. So we'll have a first series of public meetings to get input from citizens. We'll come back and we'll tell them, this is what we heard from you. Are we right? Did we get it right? Did we record the information correctly? So we'll have a second round of public meetings before we make a presentation back to city council. Well, they will need to determine the list of projects to include in the SPLOST for November of 2020. So citizen input is very important to this process.
Okay. Let's go to the last slide, Troy, if we can. These are is a listing of the public meetings that will start on October 24th. We will be basically doing the same exercise with the folks that show up at the meetings with us. Again, so it's a tool to get their input and their concerns to us. That's not to say that's the only input we'll get from them, I'm sure. Much like we got in here, we'll have some conversation and hear from folks about what their really wants and needs are involved with all this stuff here. But we want to go out and talk to the public. That's important to us. I can see us also standing here now, not that I'm trying to find myself any more work, but I can see where we could go to civic organizations or civic groups or whatever, neighborhood groups and whatever, and do the same thing we did here and get a representation about what's going on. Yeah, it may be as slanted as this group is here in terms of things going on, but it's important, again, that we get that kind of input and that kind of thought process started so we can take this back to the mayor, to the city council, and say, this is what we heard from our citizens. And if you're starting to formulate projects now, this is the direction we think we need to go. So, final thought on this, just real quick. You need to encourage your friends, your neighbors, your frenemies, whatever you got, and tell them they need to be at these meetings and make sure their voice is heard on this next round of SPLOST. This is important to us. It's important to you. It's important to us. If we want to continue the momentum we've achieved since 1997 to this point, this SPLOST is going to take us that way. It's just one of the vehicles. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience on this. Thank you for allowing me to share this with you. And just know that, again, we want to see you at the next public hearing in one of these locations between now and November 21st. Okay? That will conclude my part. And now, to wrap all this stuff up into a nice little bow, Mayor Skip Henderson.
Thank you, guys. Man, how many, show of hands, how many sat here both days? Oh, what a great, great number. How many of you just made it here today? Well, we're glad you guys could join us. We hope you got as much out of it, I think, as those that made it both days. I won't keep us long, but I do want to hear just a one or two word. Somebody shout out what their takeaway is. What is the thing that left the biggest impression on you?
I learned a lot.
Learned a lot. That covers it. We're done here. No, it is. I mean, you learn stuff that you just didn't know about your community, and that absolutely significant. Somebody else. What's the biggest takeaway? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Truths about our good, bad, and ugly, that we do have a variety of all of that.
That's right. We've got something to put in each category, don't we? Anybody else?
What moves the needle for me? Causes and champions.
Causes and champions. Excellent. Absolutely. Anybody else want to share anything?
We shouldn't wait 20 more years to do this.
We shouldn't wait. Yeah, we'll see y'all in 22 years. How about that? Fight Blight?
Fight Blight.
And blight takes a lot of different forms, doesn't it? John's up there doing handstands. Yeah, okay, here we go. You know, Lindsay, I barely saw his lips move when you said that. Leah. Yeah. Anybody else have something they want to share? Yes, Betsy.
Reminded by how many people love this place for lots of different reasons, and it's been really nifty to watch people learn stuff that they didn't know and still love it.
Yeah, that's a great insight, because sometimes the more you love something, the more you want to work on the things that you know need fixing up. And that's a great observation. Anybody else want to share anything? Ben.
It's like a lot of positive energy flow, and I think we're all just trying to come together to figure out how best to optimize it, as opposed to, I think we have something great, and if we don't utilize it now, we'll lose it. I think we're kind of afraid of losing that momentum, that energy. But we've got something truly remarkable, and we can manifest something truly beautiful in this town, because it's already existing. We just have to reveal it.
You know, you and Reverend Chester, I think those are great segues into my next comment/question. What are we prepared to do about it? I mean, if we go back and we talk about these awesome, 2 days, and it really was. I mean, Rick did an amazing job. Richard worked himself silly trying to get this thing done, and all the folks at planning that have actually put it together. It's a lot of work, and it's worthwhile if we leave here with a plan. Mr. City Manager.
And I borrowed this from Pace Politics. He said this town is a fuel jet at the beginning of the runway.
Something else he said is this town, what did he say? Something, this town knows how to take advantage of good opportunity. Well, I think that's what this was. This was a really good opportunity. So again, if we leave here and we just talk about how we had a great time, we learned some things, that's good. But we can do better than that. So what I would encourage you to do is to re-engage with some of the folks that you've met here, that you've been here with, and talk about some of the things that really kind of ignited some of your passion about this community. I will tell you, and I'm going to kind of throwing my hat over the fence, because I don't know that I've talked to the organizers of this about this, but you'll be getting an email, and you'll be asking for your input. You'll be asked for your input, and you'll be asked if you would be willing to join in maybe a couple of think tanks that we put together around certain topics that we saw over these last 2 days. Because there's got to be some action items out of this. And I appreciate so much, Will. We're not going to wait 22 more years to do this. I think this is something we need to do every 3 to 5 years, and just check the roadmap, see where we're making progress, see what neighborhoods we're able to affect change in, and where we're not, as Pastor Chester said, moving the needle. I can't thank you enough for committing these 2 full days. I thank the council and Kathy with the school board, and I know Mike was here too. So it's a lot to ask. I want to make one more comment though, because what we went through, the exercise at the end, that was designed to do exactly what the rest of these 2 days was designed to do, and that's stimulate conversation. So we know that's not a scientific way to determine, although I did see Councilor Thomas say, hey, our work is done. We know what we're supposed to do. But we want you to take some conversation back to your sphere, back to where you work, back to your families, and talk to them about some of these things. Talk to them about some of the questions that were up there, because that's how council is going to make a final decision, is by asking the citizens. They'll do what they've always done. They'll be transparent. They'll be openly communicative, and they're going to try to figure out exactly what it is that the public wants to have happen with that. So with that, just thank you again. And I guess the buses are boarding? Yes. Thank y'all. Thank you so much.